Leafs Nation? I'm not gonna lie, this feels like one of those turning point moments. Victor here. On one side, we're talking about Bobby McMahon. 19 goals, pending UFA, real trade interest around the league, and now legit conversations about whether the Leafs could move him for serious assets at the deadline. On the other side, people are calling for Craig Berube's job again, saying a coaching change is the answer to a team that's hovering near 500 and getting outscored at 5-on-5. That's not random noise. That's an organization at a crossroads. Are we selling pieces? Are we blaming the bench? Or is the problem deeper than both? Because what happens with McMahon and what management decides about Berube says everything about how they view this season. Before we dive into it, if you're riding with Leafs Nation Report, help us hit 700 subscribers. Hit like, subscribe, and let's break this down together. Alright, so let's really sit with this. For years, every deadline conversation around the Maple Leafs was about adding size and secondary scoring. We kept saying, they need a winger who can chip in, who can play with pace, who isn't afraid of contact. Now, we're talking about potentially trading that exact player away. Victor here, and I'll be honest, this Bobby McMahon situation feels like one of those uncomfortable but very real hockey business moments. McMahon has 19 goals this season. One shy of the 20 he scored last year in what was basically his first full NHL campaign. He's 6'2", skates well, plays straight lines, and he's been one of those guys who quietly does his job without drama. 2 of his 19 goals came right before the Olympic break, when the Leafs went into the hiatus on a 3-game winning streak. That little surge is what makes this complicated. Because if Toronto comes out of the break and wins those back-to-backs in Florida against Tampa and the Panthers, the whole narrative shifts. Suddenly you're not selling, you're pushing. But if they stumble, if they drop those games and the standings reality hits hard, then McMahon instantly becomes one of the most logical trade chips on the board. He turns 30 in June, he's a pending unrestricted free agent, and here's the key. His cap hit is just $1.35 million. If the Leafs retain up to 50%, basically any contender can fit him in without breaking their structure. That makes him incredibly movable. And yes, there's real interest. The big debate right now is value. Could he fetch a first-round pick? Some insiders believe the Leafs are asking for one. But as Nick Kypreos pointed out, not every team views McMahon as a legitimate locked-in top-6 winger. He can play there in stretches, but not everyone sees him as a surefire top-line upgrade. And typically, first-round picks are reserved for clear top-6 difference makers. But all it takes is one team to believe. Let's look at some of the potential destinations being discussed. Edmonton is interesting. They're always aggressive. They're always cap-tight. They signed Andrew Mangiapane for grit and depth, and it hasn't really worked. McMahon, being an Alberta native, could slide into that role. The Oilers don't have a 2026 first-rounder, so the return would have to get creative. But from a fit perspective, it makes sense. Utah Mammoth is another one to watch. They're 11-3-1 in their last 15 games. Their 5-on-5 goal differential is plus 25. Only Tampa Bay and Colorado are better. They have 5 second-round picks over the next 2 drafts. That's ammunition. And we've seen comparable pending UFAs like Kiefer Sherwood fetch multiple seconds. Utah doesn't have much size in their forward group either. McMahon checks that box. The Islanders? They're overachieving and holding down a playoff spot when many expected a reset. They rank 24th in goals per game at 2.84. They've already added veteran experience, but they need offense. McMahon could help immediately there. Seattle is fascinating too. Since moving Mason Marchment in December, they've gone 15-6-3 and are pushing hard in the Pacific. But they're 23rd in scoring at 2.88 goals per game. They also have extra second-round picks. They need size back in that lineup, and McMahon gives you that. Detroit? They're trying to end a 10-year playoff drought. They've got cap space. They need more goals, 20th in the league at 2.97 per game. And they know McMahon well from divisional battles. Even Los Angeles has been floated. They need offense badly. 2.54 goals per game near the bottom of the league. After swinging big for Artemi Panarin and losing Kevin Fiala to injury at the Olympics, maybe they double down. So this isn't random speculation. There are real fits, real contenders, real assets potentially in play. But here's where I land as a fan. McMahon isn't a superstar. He's not the face of the franchise, But he represents something this roster often lacks: affordable production, size, and straightforward play. Trading him would signal something very clear. It would signal that management is looking beyond this year. And that's where this gets bigger than just Bobby McMahon. Because if you're moving a player like that, it's not just about picks. It's about admitting that what we're seeing on the ice right now might not be enough. And that changes have to go deeper than just a depth winger. And that leads directly into the uncomfortable conversation that's been building around this team. One that isn't about a trade at all. It's about accountability, and whether the problem in Toronto is really on the roster or somewhere else entirely. All right, now let's talk about the other side of this storm. Because while we're debating whether Bobby McMahon could be moved for picks, there's another conversation getting louder in Leafs Nation, and that's the idea of firing Craig Berube. You've heard it. I've heard it. Social media is full of it. The team is hovering near 500. They've been outscored at 5-on-5. The offense stalls. The defense leaks. And when that happens, the easiest solution people reach for is the coach. But here's the uncomfortable part. Firing Berube probably doesn't fix this. That's not me defending every decision he's made. That's just looking at what's actually happening on the ice. Berube took over last year and won a division title. The playoffs were disappointing, again, but there was optimism. This year, though, the team hasn't built on that regular season success. And yes, his systems are more conservative. Yes, the offense doesn't always look free-flowing. But when you dig into the numbers, the bigger issue isn't style, it's structure. Money Puck has the Leafs sitting in the bad quadrant when it comes to goals for versus goals against. That's not just coaching philosophy, that's roster execution. The defense hasn't been consistent. Breakdowns have cost games. And in net, Anthony Stolarz has a minus 12.5 goals saved above expected. That's not on the coach. That's goaltending performance. Berube's structure actually improved the penalty kill. That's something that gets lost in the noise. But the power play has regressed. And the firing of power play coach Marc Savard earlier this season felt like a band-aid, not a solution. So when people say, just fire Berube, I get the frustration. I really do. But we've seen this movie before. Sheldon Keefe, Mike Babcock, short-term bumps, same long-term outcome. At some point, you have to ask whether the issue is deeper than whoever is standing behind the bench. And that's where this becomes about roster construction. Brad Treliving has tried to reshape this team in the post-Shanahan era, but the middle six hasn't consistently delivered. Max Domi, Dakota Joshua, Kalle Jarnkrok, Nick Robertson, the complementary scoring hasn't masked the bigger flaws. Matthew Knies has battled injuries and hasn't had the jump we hoped for. Matias Maccelli hasn't provided the spark many expected. The blue line remains a work in progress. Losing Chris Tanev doesn't help. And here's the key. None of that changes if you fire the coach tomorrow. Berube inherited a roster built to win regular season games, not necessarily to grind through playoff series. And now, even the regular season results aren't there. That's why this conversation feels heavier than just coach under fire. It's about identity. It's about whether this team is truly aligned from the front office to the roster to the bench. And that brings us back to McMahon. Because when you combine these two stories, possible trade destinations for a productive, affordable winger and calls to fire the coach, what does that tell you? It tells you this franchise is searching for clarity, searching for direction, searching for a fix. Are they buyers, sellers, retooling, rebuilding around the edges, doubling down? If you move McMahon, that's a signal. If you fire Berube, that's a different signal. If you do neither, that's a statement too. To me, this moment feels decisive. Not hopeless, not chaotic, decisive. The next stretch of games and the moves or non-moves around the deadline are going to show us what management truly believes about this group. As a fan, I'm not ready to give up. But I am ready for honesty. If this team isn't built for a deep run, then stop pretending tweaks will fix it. And if you believe in this core, then back it up with conviction. Because Leafs Nation doesn't just want noise, we want direction. And the next few days are going to tell us exactly which path this organization is choosing. So here's what all of this really means for the Maple Leafs right now. We're not just talking about one player being moved. We're not just talking about whether the coach survives another rough stretch. We're talking about identity. If McMahon is traded, that signals management is thinking beyond this season. If Berube stays, That signals they believe the issues run deeper than the bench. If nothing changes, that's a bet on this core to prove everyone wrong over the final stretch. That's why this moment feels heavy. As a fan, I don't want another quick fix. I don't want another scapegoat firing. I don't want another deadline where we pretend small tweaks solve structural problems. What I want, and I think most of Leafs Nation wants, is clarity and conviction. If you believe in this group, show it. If you believe this needs a serious retool, commit to it. But don't float in the middle. This isn't panic time, it's decision time, and that's what makes this stretch run so important. We're about to find out what this organization truly thinks about itself. Now I want to hear from you. Would you trade McMahon? Would you fire Berube? Or do you believe this team still has a push left in them? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk it out like real Leafs fans. If you've been enjoying these conversations and breakdowns, hit like and subscribe. We're pushing toward 700 subscribers. And I'd really appreciate your help getting us there. Every single one of you makes this community stronger. I'm Victor, and whatever happens next, we're riding it together. Go Leafs go!